Hello, everybody. Now, I'm sure we're all missing the International History Festival at Cressing Temple, so I thought I'd share this story I wrote a couple of years ago for it. The story about how one of the barns was actually built. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope we can meet again at Cressing Temple next year. I hate the winter. The winds here just blow across the countryside. They blow snow and rain and hail, and it gets everywhere. But at least I'm out of the wind now. We have the walls of this barn up. I just don't want to go out on the roof in this wind. Who am I? Oh, well, sorry. Let me introduce myself. Simon Dakin, Master Carpenter. I'm in charge of building this barn for the Knights Templars. I'm being well paid too. You see, I've spent time in France working with the best carpenters on cathedral roofs, and I've come back with new ideas about how to build large open spaces, which is what the Templars want for these barns. And no one pays better than the Templars. Well, after all, they are the richest people in Europe, after the kings, of course, and some say they're richer than some countries altogether. All I know is they're willing to pay me what I wanted. Not a small amount either. I might be called a master carpenter, but I don't get to do much actual carpentering anymore. It's more of an organising job. I've got to organise everything and everybody. I sometimes wish I could go back to carpentry. It's a lovely thing working with wood, like working with something living. Ah, well. I'm in charge of so many people. I've got carpenters out at the moment scouring the countryside looking for mature oak trees. I've men with teams of oxen, 2 and 4 oxen teams, out in the country now who'll drag the timber back here. Sometimes they have to go miles to find the right trees. And here I've got carpenters who carve out the ribs and the posts and all the sections from the best parts of the tree. I've got other men and boys who cut the other bits needed from the pegs to hold the joints together. And we need thousands and thousands of those. We need all the other bits. Now, if you look up in the barns and see all the pieces that go together to put that roof up, they're all cut from the right bits of wood. You look at a tree, you see the way the trunk's going, you see the way the branches are going, and you say, that will be good for that particular section, and another section of a trunk and branch will be good for another section. Now, apart from the carpentering, I've got whole gangs of people here making the clay tiles. There are thousands and thousands to be made. We had to go out and find the right sort of clay locally, and then we've got to dig it up and then mix it with water and sand. And I've got a lot of children doing that. Would you like to do it? Jumping into a pit of wet clay and sand and stamping with your feet, oozes up between your toes and you're covered with it up to your waist. Sounds fun, doesn't it? But not this time of year, not when you've got to break the ice out of the pit first. And then when the clay is made, more people are making the tiles, pressing them into moulds. They need to be just the right thickness and just the right size, with 2 little nibs at the back to hook over the timber in the roof and 2 holes with which to nail them down. Then they're taken out and laid on dry straw on the ground to dry before going in the kilns. We've got acres of land covered with straw, ready tiles. Now I'm supposed to be making a perfect building for the Templars. And what happens to the tiles when they're drying? They are walked over by dogs, by cats, by ducks, and even by little children. And they leave their footprints. And once that tile's dry, they're there forever. You know, I can imagine 750 years from now, somebody's going to pick up one of those tiles and say, look at this sweet little footprint. Well, it might be a sweet little footprint to them, but it's very annoying to me. And then I'm sending men out to cut more wood, to make the kilns, to fire the kilns that bake the tiles hard. And then we got men doing nothing but making the bricks to build these kilns. And I've got more men building. We've got to get above wall height soon, before the spring starts. And we're starting to cut the wood to make the staging, the scaffolding, so we can work high up putting the roof together. It's so high we need cranes to lift the bigger timbers up. We can't keep lifting these up to find that they don't fit. Each one is cut to size, to a plan that I've got to produce, so they all fit together like a glove. I'm quite good at that now. Men will be climbing all over the roof timbers, guiding the timbers into place, then drilling a hole with an auger and hammering the pegs through the holes to hold it all together. And while the roof's going up, more men and children are mixing the daub to go on the walls, to fill the wattle walls. This time they're mixing clay and straw and horsehair together. I do love this building, Log. From the first ideas I have to go down on plans and talking to the Templars to see if it's what they want, and then seeing it slowly rise out of the ground until the roof's on and it's dry and complete. It's a huge building, isn't it? Now, why did I use clay tiles for the roof instead of thatch? Thatch is easier to get round here, and it's a lot cheaper and easier to make. But what's going to get stored in these barns is very precious, and they don't want any chance of the barns burning down. Clay tiles are expensive, and they have to be made close by as well, because it's expensive to move them by cart any distance. And the more they get rocked around on the big old carts we've got, the more they get broken. So everything is made on site, and I'm responsible for it. Makes my head hurt sometimes too. I've got to plan it. I've got to employ all these people, find somewhere for them to live, find food for them. We have to make our own little village here while the work's going on. Once this finishes, I'll pay the labourers off, but there's myself and a core team of craftsmen will go on to whatever the next job's going to be. But in the meantime, I've got to pay everybody, buy the oxen and the horses, hire the carts, keep records so I can show the Templars exactly what it's costing. I hate keeping records. That sort of paperwork is awful. Long lists of things I bought, long lists of things I've made, long lists of figures, and an awful lot of adding up. Not much fun, is it? Sometimes in the evenings I like to go to my workshop and pick up some of the tools and a bit of wood and just make something for my children or for my family. I've got two boys. One's 13 and he's already working on site with me, learning the job. I think he's going to be a good carpenter one day, take after his father. But I've got another little boy too. He's only 5 and I love making little toys for him when I can. And then there's my wife, of course. I'm generally repairing a table or a chair for her. I might make a nice love spoon for her, if she hasn't been arguing with me. But anyway, enough of my troubles. Have you heard the latest news? Well, the master of the temple, the highest Templar in England, is coming to visit soon, and the preceptor here is in a paddy wanting everything neat and tidy. Is he important? Well, you know what Templars are. They're all important. They're probably the richest organisation in the world. But why are they rich? And what do they do with all their money? They are knights dedicated to winning Jerusalem back from the Moors. They're the ones that go on the crusades. And going on a crusade costs a fortune, a king's ransom and more. Jerusalem's over 3,000 miles away. That's an awful long way. Now, most of the people who live around here, apart from knights who are staying here, haven't been further than a day's walk from where they were born. Sending 5,000 knights all the way 3,000 miles to the Middle East is not cheap. They've got to ride horses to get there. They each have several horses, and then they're the squires, and then all the stuff that they carry with them, the weapons, the food, the armour, the tents, and, well, everything. You need lots of wagons as that, and so you need more horses for the wagons. Sometimes they'll go all the way by land, and then sometimes they'll reach the Mediterranean and then hire ships. And whichever way they're travelling, they need food and a place to live and everything. So they need a lot of money. And they run big estates like this. And all the profits from the estates go to the Crusades. But where did the Templars get these estates from in the first place? Now, sometimes knights already own their own estates, and when they become Templars, they dedicate themselves to a life of a Templar, and they give the Templars their estates. But this particular estate at Cressing Temple was given to the Knights Templar by the old King Stephen. But why would a king give all this land to the Knights Templars? Well, for glory, of course. Now, if a king's armies could liberate Jerusalem, then he would be a hero of the whole of Christendom. He would surely go to heaven, and his name would be remembered forever. But it's very expensive for a king to send his own army, so he encourages the Templars to make their own money to finance everything themselves. So, really, it's rather cheap. The king providing this land and then letting the Templars do all this work, building the barns, farming it, everything, so that they make enough money for them to take themselves to Jerusalem. The Templars told me that this is the biggest estate they have in England and the biggest money spinner. And the preceptor told me to build this barn as big as I could and to last as long as it could. That's why it's made of oak with a proper tiled roof. Now, he'd have made it out of stone, but there's little building stone around here, and that would have made it much too expensive. So the whole place at the moment is being prepared for this very important visit. Everywhere is being cleaned, everywhere is being tidied, except my building site. It's important that this gets finished as soon as possible, so nothing gets in the way of me doing my work. The manor house itself is being cleaned out. The preceptor's been kicked out of his own home. He was grumbling to me this morning about it. All the straw mattresses are being thrown out. The straw on the floor's being swept away and burnt, along with all the food bones and the dog mess that gets left in the straw. I went for a walk with him this morning to help calm him down. The dovecotes are being cleaned out, and all that manure is going to be put on the land. And the feathers that they've collected out of the dovecotes are being collected to make fresh and very comfortable mattresses, much better than straw mattresses. Some of the birds were even being collected to go on the table, and of course their eggs were being collected to eat as well. The ovens are being cleared in the bakehouse too. The vats are being scrubbed by the brewery. The 2 mills are being given the treatment too, being swept out. All the doors were open, and I watched enormous clouds of white flour billowing out of the windows and doors and being blown away. The blacksmiths are throwing out the old bits of iron that have been laying around their place, and the women are busy cleaning the church of St. Mary as we walk by, and new flowers are being put on the altar. The grass is being cut in the churchyard around the graves. We were nearly soaked as we walked past the dairy. It was being sluiced out, and a badly thrown bucket of water just missed the preceptor's robes. A large number of knights are going to accompany the Grand Master. Now, we don't see very many of the knights round here, but they're formidable men. Already knights, they've renounced everything to become a Templar. They've handed all their lands and monies over to the Templars. They've renounced women. They eat meat only 3 days a week, and they have to eat it all in silence. Doesn't sound much fun, does it? They devote themselves to war and the service of God. They always wear their white surcoats with the red cross, and they all have long beards. They're vowed not to retreat in battle. It's the greatest honour for a knight to die in battle. Tell you the truth, I generally stay away from the knights. They're not pleasant men, most of them. Now, in between all this and the preceptor's continual shouting instructions, he was trying to explain what his plans for the future of the estate were. There were already 100 tenant farmers on the estate, and he wanted to boost it to at least 150. So my barn would be full of grain to be sold to people in the nearby towns and even as far away as London. Some would go through the mills here to make flour to be sold. Some of the flour would be made into bread in his bakeries to be sold here too. He had great plans for their annual fair that's held here too. Henry III had granted them rights to hold a 3-day fair in August on the feast of the decollation of St. John the Baptist. What's a decollation? Well, it's a fancy way of saying it's the day St. John the Baptist had his head chopped off. Now, this is an important day in the Templars' calendar. It is rumoured that they actually have the 1,250-year-old head of St. John the Baptist itself in safekeeping, a sacred relic. Relics. The Vatican claim they have the same head, and so do at least 3 abbeys in France. So it's anybody's guess who's got the right one, if anybody has the right one, but you don't actually say that. I wonder if the head still smells a bit. Isn't decollation a nice word? Would you like to be decollated, sir? Better sounding than being beheaded anyway. The fairs are important times, as is the weekly market they have here as well. Not everyone is allowed to hold a market or a fair. Certain lords of the manor are allowed to, but this right is only but granted by the king. Do you know that your lord of the manor may still have rights to hold a fair on your land, and you can do nothing whatever to stop it, even now? This, of course, was another way of allowing the Templars to make more money, so the king had to spend even less money getting crusades going. Anyway, it does some good for everybody. I was here during the last fair, and the place was full. People came from up to 2 days' walk away. Some of them pushed a handcart with their wares on, some of them with a horse and wagon, some of them with panniers draped over a horse's back. All the local farmers were tenant farmers, and they grew crops from the Templars instead. But in between their work on the farm, they could make additional money making things to sell at the markets and the fairs. People brought everything from herbs, honey, mead. I like a glass of mead. Bread, pies, candles, boots, clothes, tools. I got some good new tools last August. They sell plates and bowls in wood and horn and pots, everything you can think of. The whole area was full of people for 3 whole days. They just didn't go home. They sold and bought in the day, and when the sun went down, there was drinking and singing and music and storytelling. Everyone just wrapped themselves up and went to sleep when they couldn't do anything else. I remember the talking to. Everybody talked to everybody else. That was the only way that news was spread round the countryside. Everything from what was happening in London to the king to who'd been born and who died recently in the next village and who'd been caught out doing you know what with somebody else's wife. People didn't generally travel much, so it was a wonderful opportunity to talk and swap news and pass on news. After all, this is why we're here for Cressing Temple weekend, isn't it? I hope you enjoy it, and I hope it'll come round again very soon next year. Cheers, everybody.